made up that food coming to the bathroom becomes tummy. That's probably when your kids bring candies into the bathroom. The mother's an excuse. Oh, it's tummy, you can't have it now. But it doesn't. There's no source for that. There is an Inyan b'shem tzaddikim. It says not to bring in the food into the bathroom unless it's covered with the thing. But it doesn't become tummy. It doesn't become treif afterwards. There's nothing about that.
Like double covered.
It's all. It doesn't say in halacha. There's no issue at all. Even mitzad the mekubalim, if it's also it's brought down in some places, but not like an isur mamish, and that doesn't mean that for sure doesn't become tummy afterwards.
What's about a davar shebekdusha? Like
that's different. That it says not to.
That's
sure.
probably where they're learning it out from.
Can sein. If your food is so holy, you can't bring it in. Yeah.
No, I'm saying they're bringing it right.
Can sein. Some people treat their food more than a cheret than they treat svarim.
No, but for the truma.
Huh?
Truma.
Could you bring truma to the bathroom? That's a shayla. I don't know. Maybe taka truma, you can't bring it. Question: why doesn't Chabad eat shalosh sudas? This is a very, very common mistake. It's an unfortunate mistake, and that people assume that in Chabad we do not eat shalosh sudas. The reason for this assumption is because in the Welt and all the other places of Shtiblach, so Shabbos afternoon after Mincha they sit down, they wash with chalas, and they eat some fish and they eat some salads. And Chabad it doesn't happen. So the assumption is that we don't eat shalosh sudas in Chabad. It's a terrible mistake. It's a terrible mistake in Shulchan Aruch. There's a chiyuv to eat 3 meals on Shabbos, 1 meal on Friday night and 2 meals on Shabbos day. Ideally, the meal should be after Shachris and after Mincha. But the Yevid, you can have 2 meals after Shachris and it could be before Mincha. But there must be 2 separate meals. In Shulchan Aruch it says the chatchila you're supposed to have this for the 3rd meal. You have to wash and eat hamayis. But the Yevid you can have mezainis, and by the Yevid you can be yaitze even with fruit and vegetables. But you must eat. 1 second. But you must eat something. And the minhag Chabad is that we're not makbid on washing. We don't mind either eating just mezainis or just the adam and ha'etz. We're okay with that with the Yevid. Not only we're okay with that, lechatchila we're mahader to not wash and dafka eat either mezainis or adam or ha'etz. The reason for that is al-pi Kabbalah, it's also al-pi Nigla, the whole source for eating shalosh sudas, 3 meals on Shabbos, is because it says in the Torah 3 times hayoim, when it comes to the mitzvah of the mon. So it says 3 times hayoim, ichlu hayoim, ki Shabbos hayoim lashem, hayoim loy timtzu basada. So the last time it says hayoim, it says next to the word loy, hayoim loy, today not. So b'meila, since the last time it says not, so we're minimizing that meal. And then al-pi Kabbalah, that Inyan, the gilu that's shining in the world, and Ivan is above the world. It's made the la'asid lavi, ein be'achila v'shtiya. So therefore, we're already feeling, so to speak, the gilu of la'asid lavi, which is above food. But you have to eat. It's very, very sad that many bachim think that there's no point in eating shalosh sudas. It's very wrong. You have to have a second. The chatchila, it's meant to be done after mincha. But even if you don't do it after mincha, you can do it before mincha. It's also brought down that the Rebbe Rashab, and when it was the winter Shabbosim, so after Shachris he would make Kiddush and make Kiddush and eat mezainis, and then he would daven Mincha, and then he would wash after Mincha. So the point was to have 3 meals, to have 3 separate meals. So the meal between Shachris and Mincha was 1 meal, and the meal after Mincha was the 3rd meal. But there has to be dafka 3 meals. And that's you can do it. So chatchila after mincha, but the Yevid also before mincha. So after you're done your meal, so to eat right away afterwards is al-pi halacha. It's a bit questionable. You can wait a half hour, an hour, then just take a snack, and then you'll be ate to that to shalosh sudas, and it must be done every single Shabbos. 1 second. Yes, Arya.
Why don't we have something like that here? Like everyone goes downstairs now for a small snack.
Or they bring the
It's a good question. We can bring it up to the management. Huh? After mincha, you can still eat a few minutes after shkia. I'm not sure exactly, but that's earlier. Huh? We can make mincha earlier. We can try. Yeah. We'll speak to the management.
We're gonna make the cake, right?
It doesn't have to be cake. It can be anything. It can be anything. So before Shachris, it cannot be considered a su'udah, because before Shachris you're not allowed to eat. And if it's considered a su'udah, they have to make Kiddush first. Which in the Welt they tell us that the people that don't eat before davening, they tell the Bavitchers they eat before davening. How can you eat before Kiddush? If it's a Suda on Shabbos, you have to eat before Kiddush. So the answer is that the meal, what we eat before Shabbos, it's not the gather of Suda. It's the gather of the achona for davening. And if you consider it a Suda, it has to have Kiddush. So that's why that can't be counted.
So Shul is our second meal?
Huh?
So Shul is our second meal?
Well, yeah, Bachim that go to Shul afterwards, after they eat the meal over here and they bench. If they bench first. So you bench after the meal and then go to Shul, eat something else, and very good. Add that up.
What about the places that do mincha right after mincha?
I think that's very wrong for these reasons.
Can you wait to the second Suda by Mitzrayim?
That's what he just asked. Before davening, you're saying?
No, the second Suda.
For sure. Shalosh Sudas you can to a Mitzrayim. That's our minute.
Can you make
Not
Kiddush
only
before Shacharis?
No.
I know the family that.
Everyone's asking that question. The Mitzrayim before davening is not considered the Suda.
No, I asked like you said the Rebbe, one of the Rebbeim.
The Rebbe Rashab would make Mitzrayim first.
Yeah, Mitzrayim. So, yeah.
That was for but after
So that was Shanakilu Bayom.
he made Musaf and he had Mitzrayim, and then afterwards he davened mincha, and then he washed for Shalosh Sudas.
אז גם בסעודה הזאת זה בסדר יכול מזונות?
סעודה ראשונה? זה נושא אחר. זה נושא שאלה אחרת. זה בדיון שלה.
What about a kiddush between Shacharis and Musaf?
Halachically, you're not allowed to eat before Musaf a certain amount. Besides the kabeya you can't have. And if there's a suda, have to be a kabeya. But maybe if a person eats the Kiddush club, I think it's a terrible minig, but that's already beside other reasons. But halachically, if you eat it then, the suda, maybe if you afterwards, but those guys don't usually bench afterwards. So when they eat later, it's a continuation of the previous suda. They don't bench at all, they bench after Musaf. So it's not a separate suda. So Simchas Torah is lamad them everything. You can't explain anything in Simchas Torah. Can't ask any questions. Can you paskin using Ruach HaKodesh? For example, Shnayim Eichazin, and you know two people come to you holding a talus, and you know with Ruach HaKodesh who it belongs to, can you give it all to him? The answer is no. Rabbonim, Tzadikim, even though they had Ruach HaKodesh, they were not able to paskin with Ruach HaKodesh. There's a famous story with the Mezritcher Maggid, that a Yid came to the Maggid and he said, Rebbe, someone stole something from me. So the Maggid told him, it's ploini ben ploini, that person needs the Ganav. So the Yid that was stolen from him went to the Ganav and he told the Ganav, you stole my stuff. So how did you know? So the Maggid told me. So the Yid said, okay, know something, let me go to the Maggid. So he came to the Maggid, the Ganav came to the Maggid, he told the Maggid, he says, Rebbe, you're using Ruach HaKodesh to catch people, that's not right. So the Maggid told him, you have a taina, you're true, but you should know that I saw that you were the Ganav when I was in the bathroom. So therefore, I was able to, it wasn't Ruach HaKodesh, it was like a different kind of koyach that I saw, whatever the beer might be. But you're not supposed to use the Ruach HaKodesh to pass him. So b'meile, Mati, you understand? You don't use your Ruach HaKodesh to pass on halachas, you have to just learn and then pass on according to that. Are you allowed to jump the gate to the subway or ride the bus without paying? No, of course not. I don't understand the shayla. You're not allowed to say misat stealing and say misat chilul Hashem. That they b'derech kol they end up cashing bachrim anyway. So what's the point?
Can you,
Another point.
what about when the next going?
Same thing. If something doesn't belong to you and there's a person that put up a sign, you can't do that. No. You're not allowed to lie. No.
I'm not trying to squeeze 10 people through the thing to the mikvah.
Should we be afraid of another Holocaust, Rahmanu Litzlan, if Biden wins? No, Chas v'Sholom, you shouldn't be afraid of anything. And I don't know why people think that think they know everything. But those that follow the news by MS, they claim that Trump supports the KKK. Which is if anything, for continuation of the Nazis, Rahmanu Litzlan. Not that there's nothing to be afraid of, regardless who wins, and nothing. We have to dive into Hashem, and Hashem takes care of us. But being afraid of anything in this world is wrong.
Trump supports the KKK the same way Biden likes the what?
No. I'm not saying that I know, but I think Bachrim are reading the news articles and they're hearing things and they decide that they know already, and therefore they're being afraid. A Bachrim shouldn't know that. I'm saying, but if Baruch is afraid of this, so you can be afraid of that also. I'm just saying there's no reason to be afraid of anything. If the Eibush is afraid of the world, then your person should. Baruch shouldn't talk on these things. Should know about these things. Huh? You should not buy any guns. No. Is that another question? Is it also al pi Torah to support a party that allows things which are not allowed according to Torah? Example, there's a big mistake over here. The Bachrim today, there's everyone's kiryachal kachim Trump. Bachrim have to realize that Frum Yidden don't go for Trump. Frum Yidden go for the Eibishter for Torah mitzvahs. And if he happens to be now a shliach, so that's why we're voting for him. It doesn't mean that whatever he says we agree with. It doesn't mean that we're associated with his party. It bothers me very much that Bachrim are wearing the pins now and the flags and all that. We're not Trump fans. We're not Trump people. We're not followers of Trump. We're followers of the Eibishter. And the Eibishter tells us how to live our lives and what to do. And therefore, if right now he's the shliach that seemingly al piteva, he's the one that's helping at Yidden and Yiddishkeit and Eretz Yisrael. Yisrael, then he's the one that we should be voting for. But we're not his people, we're not his followers. It's a very, very big mistake. And Mamela Bocher has to identify with this party and that party, and that the party was against halacha. Every party, every goyish person that is in office will have shittas, will vote for things that are against Klal Yisrael. Trump also has a solution for Eretz Yisrael, which is against Shulchan Aruch. He wants to give Palestinians a state. So versteht sich, it's better than what other people want to do, but Tzad Sheni is a big pachad, because Trump, whatever he says, he actually does. So if he'll actually try to make this happen, Rahman al-Islam, it could be terrible for the Yid.
He canceled already.
Zal sein, but he can try again. The point is, that when you vote for any kind of office, you vote what's closest to Yiddishkeit. Now, Eretz Yisrael also, the Rebbe's kav is always that you have to vote for the party which is closest to Yiddishkeit, which supports Yiddishkeit the best kind of way. There's no party in Eretz Yisrael or in America which runs with our ideals 100%. So you have to go to the one that's the most. So even so, the example the Bacher wrote, the specific example that the other party, so that's wrong. But you have to find out what's the most fitting with Yiddishkeit, and then you vote for that, and before and after that you have no shaykhs to it. The whole kachin and finding out the news and caring about who wins and who loses is a very, very big mistake. It's not dark Chassidus, and for a Bacher that should be, it's for sure very, very wrong.
Trump is the closest to Yiddishkeit because he's...
The way I understand, that's what people are saying. That's what they ask. But I'm not a Trump fan. I'm not a Trump person. I'm a chassid of the Rebbe. I'm a from Yid. That's what my life is. So right now I do that, and that's it. You don't have to invest more and whatever. Put flags at your cart and pins in your things. It's ridiculous.
So why did the chassid of the Rebbe Mara scream who?
Because that's what the Rebbe Rash had to do.
He told him to vote.
Say there. So it was the same thing. The Rebbe spoke about a the Rebbe spoke about there was a chassid that when there was a coronation of the Tsar Nikolai, so he was an older chassid, he heard about it, and he said, I don't understand why they're making coronation. That he was already crowned. He's talking, what do you mean? He's even crowned right now. So they chaptzech, but when this chassid was a little child, so Nikolai the First was crowned, and he didn't know that since then he was already assassinated and killed, and other kings took his place, and the Nuki now. But this chassid, he heard one time when he was a kid, and since then he never heard anything about it. And then 20 years later, 30 years later, he heard of another ma'aseh. That's the way a Bacher is supposed to be. I know it's not so practical, but you should know that that's the way it's supposed to be.
They can't compare that.
It's a lot harder than today. True. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, it's harder today, but you should know where your head is supposed to be. Does one have a right to be upset at the brains Hashem gave him? Can one wish he had better ones? Two different questions. You're not supposed to be upset at anything. Whatever Hashem gives you is what you need to serve Him. So if somebody feels that his brains are not capable enough, he's not talented enough to like other people that he thinks, and therefore he's bothered by it, so that's a mistake of his whole approach. There's a famous story. There was a Bacher that was a son of a Gadol. I don't know who he was, but it seems like people know the story, know exactly who he was. His father was a very, very big Rav in Eretz Yisrael, one of the biggest Rabbanim, that's what it's understood. A big Rav in Eretz Yisrael. And this Bacher grew up in a home that his father's the Rav and his father's Talmid Chacham, and he asked me the same thing. So he went to Yeshiva and he sat and learned 15 hours a day. He sat and he got hard of it, but he wasn't blessed. He wasn't the same caliber. He wasn't Gadol material. He wasn't able to make it. So B'meila, even though he sat and he learned for hours and hours, he still didn't advance so much in his studies. And he was terribly broken, because in his whole life he knew that he has to be a Gadol, because that's what he grew up with, and he's trying. It's not happening. And they asked different people for advice, and one person sent him to the Rebbe. So he wrote a letter to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe wrote him back that your whole approach is wrong. Your whole approach is that you have to be a Gadol. You have to serve Hashem. That's why Hashem put you in this world. And Hashem gave you certain capabilities. You have to use them to your fullest. If you happen to be a genius and you learn a little bit, but other people learn a lot, but you waste the rest of the time, then you're not doing what Hashem wants of you. It's a person has to know, if Hashem gave me certain kishrenis, this is what I should never feel upset at Hashem that I didn't accomplish what I was supposed to accomplish. This is what Hashem gave me. This I have to serve Hashem. It's a big problem, because Bachim look at all their friends, and my friend, look, he doesn't pay attention in class, and with a half a year he listens, and he's sleeping the whole year, but at the end comes the test, he gets 100. And I listen and I take notes and I chazer, and I'm only getting 70s and 80s. So you don't have to feel bad. This is what Hashem wants from you. This is to be upset at the Eibusher doesn't make sense. This is what the Eibusher wants from you. You should be very happy. You should serve Hashem happy. Regarding the second question, can I wish I had better ones? So the approach is different. The approach is, I want to be able to learn Hashem's Torah. There's stories of numerous Gdolei Yisrael. They say it about the Rambam. I don't know the story. I don't know how reliable it is, but it's a famous story that when the Rambam was a child, they say that his father would teach him and he didn't know how to learn, and he wasn't getting it, and his father was upset at him, he threw him out of the house, it's not so clear that, again, this whole story is not lavdafka reliable. But the point was that eventually the Rambam went to Shul, and he went to Aron Kodesh, and he opened Aron Kodesh, and he cried, till he fell asleep over there, and when he woke up, his mind opened up, and now he was able to, and then he became the Rambam. So, the Rambam, he asked, he wanted to learn, but it wasn't about that he wanted to be smarter. We say every day by Daven, the same we're asking Hashem to give us bina so we should understand better. But it's not about our own thing. It's all about the Eibusha's Torah. Someone wants to be smarter, to be able to just to prove and show off better, that's a completely wrong thing. You want to serve Hashem better, you want to learn Hashem's Torah, to appreciate the sweetness of Hashem's Torah, so you ask Hashem to give you more brains. But it's not about brains as seichel. You want to be able to connect Hashem more. But if you're not holding that you really care about that, you should be satisfied with your lot that you have. I mean, not completely. You have to always work to have more and more. But it shouldn't be breaking you. I'm not as smart as somebody else. If you should be broken, why aren't you serving Hashem as much as somebody else? That's what's supposed to bother you. But the brains, the whole IQ and intelligence shouldn't be a reason for a person to be upset. And shouldn't bother anybody. What is the Indian if you see the Rebbe in a dream? I don't know. It says nice things. If someone sees a tzaddikim in a dream, I think it's a siman toiv. But I don't know anything practical. It's l'chayda. It's a good siman. What that means l'poil, I'm not sure. What if the kelim of the Beis Hamikdash that are in the Vatican are given back to the Yidden in an hour? What would be the din about them? So, first of all, okay, the question is, if we know the kelim of the Beis Hamikdash were given back, the ones that are in the Vatican, I don't know if we know for sure what's there, and if it's not in the Beis Hamikdash, and if they'll return it, it'll be the same thing, and it's not about an hour, if it's right now. If we have access to the kelim of the Beis Hamikdash, what has to be done? The way I understand is we're all tamei, so it can't be handled directly, it has to be handled with, so we're not supposed to be meisiv tumah. So since we're tamei meis, we can't touch a kli the Beis Hamikdash, so it has to be handled with, let's say, an extension of something, and then it has to be put away in a special place, and as soon as Mashiach comes, we'll table it, and we'll be metahid it, and bring it back to the Beis Hamikdash. So far as I understand, that's what has to be done. Huh? Kehanim are also tamei. All kehanim are tamei.
You can't be tevel.
Huh?
You can't tevel.
We're tevel. Who's taking it out of the mikveh?
So if they're already telling us, what's the point of them
even if you're tamei, you shouldn't be touching tamei. If something is tamei, the way I understand, touching it again is another issue.
But according to this, the fact that the tamei anyways, and then what's the connection of them being very careful about that this is work? Because they'll be tamei anyways.
Because even though you're tamei, you're not supposed to continue becoming tamei again. If the kohen is touching someone that's dead, or he's in a, he has to go out immediately. You're tamei anyway, because every moment that you're there is being meisiv tumah. Not halachically, but in premise, according to halacha, he has to go out.
And every person cannot go to because it's adding to.
Or Yisrael is allowed to become tamei.
But it's adding to our tumah.
We're allowed to become tamei. It's no issue. So the kli base, I think the kli Mikdash also has this applies, and therefore we should not be touching it, and therefore we should use an extension, whatever, a stick or something, whatever it might be, lifts and stuff like that, and bring it to a safe place and see the Mikdash, and wait for the Mashiach to come retire.
Are you ever in the museum?
Huh? What? Aron Kodesh l'chayda, yeah, those four kelim, the Aron Kodesh and the Menorah and the Mizbeach HaPnimi and the Shulchan, I think will be the same. Mizbeach HaChitz is going to be different, I think, but the other ones will be.
I was put in the museum.
L'chayda, nah, these things are not meant to be in public. I mean, in the it says in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, or when something was tamei, they showed it out, they put it on exhibit. But it only says that about, I think, the Pareichesim. I don't know about the other kelim. Maybe if it could put maybe from farm museum that no one can get close to it. Maybe I don't know. I don't know.
They have to cover the art.
I don't know. Huh?
No, it's let it die.
Huh?
Let it die.
It'll record though.
Yeah, it's recording, so. But no one knows.
Huh?
It's gonna die.
Huh?
It's gonna die soon. So.
Just turn it off. Huh?
Yeah.
Turn it off. All right. What is the inyan in covering your head when you are saying a bracha? And does it make a difference if you use your sleeve? So the earliest source that I was able to find in Igla for putting a second covering on your head is the famous story that everybody knows from the Gemara Masechta Shabbos, that Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, when he was young, so his mother was told that he's going to be a thief, he's going to be a ganev. So because of that, the Gemara says, Lo yishvakte gilui reishei. she didn't let him. She didn't let him go without a head covering, and she kept telling him, cover your head so you'll have Yira Shamayim. And the Gemara says one day he was sitting and learning under a palm tree, and the glima, the head covering, fell off his head, and he looked up at the palm tree and he saw some dates. And his Yetzer Hara was so strong to steal that he went up and he bit off some of the dates. So this story is always brought down as a yarmulke story. The Marsha says it can't be a yarmulke because obviously he had a yarmulke the whole time. Elamai, glima bichlal, glima means like a cloak. So the Marsha learns pshat that there was a second covering. And the reason why his mother added the second covering, because she understood that since a yarmulke is, one of the reasons for a yarmulke is to have Yira Shamayim, so having a second yarmulke will add even more Yira Shamayim. And based on this Marsha, it's brought down on the Paiskim indeed to add a second covering in order to have more Yira Shamayim. And then Al Pi Kabbalah, this is the Gedolei Achsidus, they all bring that there's an Indian to have two coverings. In Sefer HaMenagim as well, it says that our minig is to have a yarmulke under your hat, which basically means that when we daven, we should have two coverings. So it's not halacha as you must have it, but it's a very important hidur, which in Chabad it applies in Chabad. Regarding the second half of the question, does it make a difference if you use your sleeve or not? So Bechlal it says in halacha that if a person doesn't have a head covering, so if using a hand to cover your head is not enough. So if your yarmulke falls off for chas v'shalom, for whatever it is, putting your hand is not going to be counted as a yarmulke for whatever you need a yarmulke. And the reason is because it says that the quote that Chassidus always quotes, "Ein etzem mastir al etzem." You can't be covering yourself. This is you. Your hand is part of you as well. So therefore, it's not considered a second covering. Regarding the second covering, there's no halachas in Shulchan Aruch which describe the detail how it's supposed to work. So some people say that when it comes to the second covering, so the same rule applies like the first covering. The first covering has to be something else, a yarmulke or your sleeve, so the second covering as well. Some people argue that when it comes to the second covering, it's already a covering on top of a covering, maybe it would be enough, but B'Peil Mamish, most Chassidim are makbid, as far as I understand, that even with the second covering to use a sleeve. But it doesn't say clearly, as far as I didn't see anywhere clearly, that the second covering is the same halachas like the first covering. I don't think that's connected. I think the two layers of a yarmulke make it into one yarmulke. But I think the two layers of the yarmulke, since they're knitted together, it's still considered as one yarmulke.
So then, if that's the case, then a lot of people usually have like what's it called? Tissue under the yarmulke.
A tissue is a separate piece. Yeah, if you have two yarmulkes, that's also good. Next question. How do you ask someone if he can be your mashbiyya? So I have an argument with Yisrael Noach Gurkov's grandfather. Yisrael Noach Gurkov has a grandfather that was a tzaddik. His name was Shimon HaTzaddik. For me to argue with him is like me arguing with Moshe Rabbeinu. But Afal B'chein, I personally beg to differ with him.
That's Yedom's grandfather. That's Yedom's grandfather.
Sure. In his sefer, there's a sefer that they write. It's not a sefer. There's a biography of him that he writes that if you want someone to be your mashbiyya, you have to ask him first permission. You have to go over and tell him, please be my mashbiyya. I disagree. I think that it's not necessary. I think you could start asking somebody questions, and if you choose someone to be a mashbiyya, so if he's a person that's worthy of being a mashbiyya, he's probably smart enough to understand that you want him to be his mashbiyya, and he'll figure it out. And therefore, you don't have to actually specifically ask him for it. And I want to maybe explain that Mara Marchada V'lei Pligi, because when you read the story, his biography about his life, so he would ask his mashbiyya questions non-stop. He's always asking his mashbiyya questions. So when maybe a person that you're going to ask him mashbiyya questions all the time, over here maybe it makes sense. You should ask him permission first. He should know that what he's getting himself into. But most bachrim don't talk to the mashbiyya all the time, so maybe it's not so necessary. At the same time, I know there was when the Rebbe came out with the mitzvahs, the Seiloch Harav, there were a number of big Chassidim in Eretz Yisrael that right away everyone called them up. Can you be my mashbiyya? I forget which one of them, maybe Zusha Partizan or maybe Matuk Gazlin, I forget. And one of them said, he said that at a certain point, I'm not taking any more mushpoim or mekablim, because I accepted it by myself to take 18, and already 18 people called me, so I'm not taking more than that. So Vaisto is that there is such a thing that there's an agreement, but the way I understand is you don't have to officially ask. you start asking the person shaylas, and he gets the point that you want it to be mashbiyya. If you want it to be more official, there are many bachrim that they don't have what to ask. They just want to fulfill the Rebbe's Eirah. So therefore, they go and they ask someone, can you be more mashbiyya? My grandmother, thank you, stark when the Rebbe came out with the Eirah to be make a seluch harav, so it was for women as well. So my grandmother told me that a certain very chashav woman in Lubavitch called her up and said, I want you to be my mashbiyya, but on one condition, that no one should know about it. Because that woman was a need capacity that she should ask someone else to be her mashbiyya. So maybe she asked her that one time. I can officially write to them that they have a mashbiyya, and then she never asked my grandmother any questions. But that was the official, like he appointed somebody. So if it's just about appointing someone to make on your checklist, then l'chayr you have to ask him. Otherwise, you can't make the checklist. But if you want a real mashbiyya, someone to talk to and ask him for advice, I don't think there has to be an official appointment, official anointment, if that's the word. Just start asking him, start talking to him, and then he'll get it. And so sometimes you can say, I really need your opinion because I'm going to do what you say. You can be meramis him if you're uncomfortable saying it. Or if you want, you can write him a letter, and so that also could work. Sometimes the bachrim is more comfortable. How can you enjoy learning Gemara? At times it can get really boring and not fun. So the Bachar is a little bit contradicting himself. How can you enjoy learning Gemara? And at times it's boring and not fun. That means you yourselves are saying that there are times that it's not really boring and it is fun. So the question is how to make it fun all the time. I don't think anything is fun all the time. Even basketball gets boring once in a while. No? Huh? Yossi disagrees. Huh? 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 Yeah, Yossi, right? Not football, but basketball. But the way to make it, the way to enjoy it, the more you know how to learn, the more you enjoy it. And Bechlal, the goal is not always to enjoy it. It's very important to enjoy learning, but you don't have to enjoy the learning all the time. There's a famous story that there was a chassid that complained to the Tzemach Tzedek. He said, Rebbe, what should I do? I don't enjoy learning. So the Tzemach Tzedek responded, Petach, what should I do that I do enjoy learning? Petach is an expression for like a dumbbell or something, like idiot. Like I have the problem because I enjoy learning. You that don't enjoy learning, you can do it for the right reasons. So it doesn't mean that you're not supposed to enjoy learning, but it means that you can't expect to enjoy learning all the time. And whenever you don't enjoy learning, so you learn it, you do a scoff and you force yourself. But the more you learn, the more you understand how to learn, the more you're going to enjoy it. But that's how it works. Next question: Should a yid who lives according to Torah and Chassidus, Shittas HaChassidus, run for president or any position of political power? Is there a problem with it, and why? You can try to run for president, it's not going to really help you much. But any other position in political power. So in Pirkei Avos it talks about politics. In Pirkei Avos it says in general, Al tisvada laroshus, don't get close to politicians. And also l'chayra means don't get involved in politics. Any kind of political place is not a place for a yid. At the same time, it does say that there were throughout the generations there were yidden that had close connections with politicians, and we call it in other words. We said today by davening because achodesh oischim b'tzarchei tzibur. So there are people that are community activists, and that's their union to help out other people, and they have to get involved. They have to deal with politicians, and sometimes they themselves get voted in to be a politician. So it's a shayla b'makim she'ein anoshim. If it's a situation that a person knows that if he's not going to run for office, the other candidate, the other people are going to be very bad for Yidden, for Yiddishkeit, and he has no choice for him other than him to run, then the Yiddishkeit will go for it. There's a famous story that there was a Yid that was a king. What was his name? Ah? I don't know. The kids' tape or something. A king of Poland. He was a king of Poland, entire Poland, for one night. Anyone knows the story? Reb Shol. Reb Shol, I forget his last name right now. Katzenellerboigen. Katzenellerboigen, yeah?
Oh, I know.
Daryavish is also, but Shlomo Melech, no. But he went out of Poland. Val, that's his name. Shaul Val. The Katzenellerboigens are descendants of Shaul Val. Shaul Val was the king of Poland for one night. There's a ganze Maisa that the seder in Poland was that when a king dies, and then they have to have someone, they have to appoint within themselves somebody. Kitzer, not all the princes were there. It wasn't the shaykh to do it to appoint properly, to make the proper elections. So, but they had a rule that you can't go overnight without a king. So one of the princes over there said, I have a yid that I know he's very trustworthy. You tell him to be king for one night and to give up the next day, he'll be winning. Says anybody else will be king for one day, would ride away the next day, kill everybody else, and that's it, and stay king forever. but he's for sure not going to be interested, so he was king for one night, and that one night he made many gzeiros. He was mevatel bad gzeiros, and he enacted good gzeiros for the Yidden, and cholifin. So there are times that it's necessary. So if it's necessary, yeah, but in most situations it's not necessary. It's enough that there are other people that are there, and b'meila there wouldn't be a problem. To be a president of the United States, I don't think it's a practical question. Maybe Ben Shapiro, but even if he has to, he has to be Shemesh Shulchan Aruch, he has to keep Shabbos. I think to be a president, you have to be on call 24/7, or at least 7 days a week, and you might have to be Michal Shabbos for that. So obviously, it wouldn't be an option.
There was one. His name is Joe Lieberman.
Yeah, he was senator. That was also he ran for vice president. No,
he ran for president against Obama.
No.
He was senator.
All right, next question. From where do we know that we are not allowed to eat or bring food into the bathroom? So this is actually a little bit of one of those myths that doesn't really say anywhere. It does say that a person is not supposed to eat in the bathroom, but it's mutad derech, it's a pasnish. Just like when you're eating, you're supposed to eat in a respectable way. According to the hilchas derech, you shouldn't be putting both hands into your plate when you're eating. So part of those hilchas derech dictate that you shouldn't be eating in the bathroom because it's also not appropriate. But not b'tzad